The fire raced down the strobe hall, fed by the seemingly limitless energy being released by the polyurethane foam, easily consuming the plywood panels that had almost no resistance to the spreading flame. Ahead of the flame, a ball of smoke raced down the hallway, past the lady on the wheel, and to the unsuspecting group in this part of the maze. Outside the main exit, a teacher from Operation Plus noticed one of his students, who would only ever be identified by his initials, JF, exiting the castle as smoke began to rise. This aroused suspicion. JF was not only seen with a lighter that day, but he had been sent to the school for the emotionally disturbed after setting a fire that had caused $200,000 in damage. He was dressed identically to the boy that Joey Iraka would later say started the fire. The only employee inside at this time was Scott at the butcher station. He smelled smoke and he walked to the passageway to Phantom, where he saw smoke filtering down the patron walkway. He could go no further.
Scott later told me that he was prevented from going into the walkway of Phantom because of the iron fence.
Reports of smoke in the haunted castle were common, so the main security control room did not contact Jackson Township Fire Department immediately, but rather called the small Six Flags Fire Brigade. They could barely get through the crowd to the haunted castle. One of the rigs broke down, and reportedly there was no water pressure. They'd have to wait for water tankers from the big companies in Jackson Township. Scott jumped over the railing from Butcher and escorted some frightened and panicked guests back towards the main entrance. The guests seemed unsure if the smoke they were smelling wasn't part of the show, and if somehow Scott wasn't part of the show as well. They were all terrified, but all made it back to the main entrance. Outside, some thought the coughing patrons were part of some publicity gag. According to official accounts, employee Gary Caplow ran back into the castle to help. The first leg of the castle between the entrance and the butcher was breathable, at least for the time being. The organ music never stopped playing, and the air conditioning continued to work, aiding the spread. Gary shined his flashlight down the dark, smoky corridor, and soon he noticed a young girl laying on the floor. She was dressed in black, and she had a bandana tied around her mouth. He picked her up, and he carried her to safety.
Once outside, the girl was treated for smoke inhalation and other injuries and identified. It was Suzette Elliott from the Victory Christian School. She looked all around the crowd but was unable to find Tina.
Suzette was rushed to a local area hospital. The fire became so enormous that it took 15 local volunteer fire squads to extinguish it.
Despite the fire, the park remained open around it. A scheduled concert by Dutch rock band Golden Earring could be heard from the Great Arena, right here. The smoke was so noticeable that Barry Hay, the lead singer of Golden Earring, later told me that he actually stopped his concert and remarked to the crowd about the huge column of black smoke that could be seen in the distance. Many people questioned, but the official answer was that no one had been hurt except for minor injuries, and the fire would be no reason to close the park or to cancel the concert.
Even the firefighters themselves believed initially that everyone had gotten out safely, until they noticed a large pile of debris in the area of the castle that had once been the Red Sides revolving barrel display area. At first it was reported that these life-size figures were disregarded as mannequins, but soon it was realized that they were 8 badly burned and distorted human bodies. 7 were piled up on top of one another in this area, and 1 was steps away. Some of them had their faces pressed against the air conditioning grate on the floor.
The death toll would prove to be the highest in amusement park history, one more than the 7 who died 40 years earlier in another New Jersey fire on the Virginia Reel at the Palisades Amusement Park. It was also the 2nd largest mass death in Ocean County history, right behind the Hindenburg disaster that occurred in nearby Lakehurst on another May evening almost 50 years prior. The park was immediately closed. Patrons were not told of the deaths, merely given an apology for the inconvenience and a return pass. At about 10:30 p.m. that night, Suzette would return to Six Flags Great Adventure once again, to the Victory Christian bus, the only bus remaining in the parking lot. The chaperones were in the administration building, trying to get information about the missing Tina. Suzette had it in her mind that she was going to go through this gate and go into the park and try to find Tina. She went in as far as the haunted castle scene, even seeing body bags being removed. Despite all this, Suzette had difficulty fully accepting Tina's death for weeks, and she spoke little about her experience for a long time. Only she knew exactly what happened to she and the 8 others. Many people were interested in what she had to say, but she remained protected by her parents, isolated, and unavailable for comment indefinitely, so her story wouldn't be fully told for years. Mass media was alerted to the 8 deaths 4.5 hours after the initial reports of the fire. Franklin K. Lane buses returned to Brooklyn, unsure if everyone was accounted for and present. Joey Iraca went home and told his parents everything he saw and everything he knew. On the ride home to Operation Plus, JF flicked his lighter on the darkened bus and stared at the flame. As soon as the bus was parked, the teacher called New Jersey State Police to say he'd seen the emotionally disturbed youth with history of fire setting exiting the castle as the fire began.
Also on the phone that night was Mrs. Helen Fields, the wife of Reverend Wayne Fields of Philadelphia. She told a reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer that she had been in the haunted castle just minutes before the fire and had tried to exit out the Strobe emergency door because her children were scared, but it was chained shut. Her husband was with her. When dawn broke on May 12, 1984, 8 children had not returned home the previous night. Slowly, identifications were being made by Dr. Haskell Askin, the forensic dentist of choice in the New York metro area. Slowly, victims' names were being released to the press. Tina Genovese, Joey Beirudi, Nick Cayaza, Sammy Valentine, Eric Rodriguez, Lenny Ruiz, Christopher Harrison, and Jose Carrion, all dead in the haunted castle. Of the dead, 6 were 18, 1 was 17, and Tina Genovese would have been 16 that upcoming Monday.
Some of the grieving parents showed up to the gates of Six Flags Great Adventure in an attempt to get more information and to see the site where their children almost certainly died. Some parents were not let in until they paid the standard one-day adult admission.
As authorities examined the ruins of the haunted castle, investigators from the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office spoke to JF and his parents in Pennsylvania. JF said he didn't do it, but the investigators were not convinced. They would bring the information back to their boss, Ed Turnback. But this was virtually the last mention of JF. As Ocean County prosecutor, Ed Turnback had difficult decisions to make. 8 teenagers had died in a building with serious safety issues that was not built using the proper codes or channels. But who was to blame? The Jackson Township building inspectors, the Mahanas, or worse, Six Flags Great Adventure itself? A prosecution against this company could not be good for the county. Six Flags Great Adventure was one of the biggest taxpayers and employers in Ocean County, and one of the most important industries in the state. Furthermore, Six Flags was owned by a parent corporation, Bally Manufacturing Incorporated. Bally operated a gambling casino and owned a huge skyscraper on the skyline of nearby Atlantic City. Atlantic City casinos were some of the only businesses in New Jersey bigger than Great Adventure. The National Fire Protection Association was unconcerned with local politics. Its study at the haunted castle would eventually change its national life safety code. In the future, there would be much stricter regulations for what it would call special amusement buildings. Before the haunted castle ruins were bulldozed, the Ocean County Sheriff's Department Criminal Investigations Unit used a relatively new device, a handheld camcorder, to record the bizarre death trap. Listen as the screams from the roller coaster drone on as the investigators try to make sense out of the chaos.
Okay, I know what you're saying. That side, even in the burn, is a mirror image of this side.
Yes, you're talking same material on one side versus the other, same type of structure, one side versus the other, same passageways, same air currents.
The sheriff's officers documented the devastation from every possible angle, and their keen photography of this area would, 20 years later, unlock some of the mystery of the haunted castle.